We're here today with Judge Sara Agne from the Superior Court. We're at the Durango Juvenile Center Court building, which, so I want to start off by saying thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today as part of our Pathway to the Bench program that we're doing for Los Abogados. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for coming down to visit. I appreciate it very much.
I really like the surroundings. We've got some lovely stuffed animals that are making it a lot cozier here, and we're actually sitting on the bench today, so it's kind of a treat. But again, thank you for your time.
Happy to.
So we'll start off by asking some background questions about yourself and how you got to where you are today. So where are you originally from?
I was born in Minnesota, Edina, Minnesota, but then my family moved to Mesa when I was 7 years old. So my father got a new job, my mom wanted a warmer climate, and we all moved out here to Mesa. I say I'm almost an Arizona native.
Okay. And then where did you go to undergrad?
Undergrad was at Arizona State University, so go Sun Devils. I got my Bachelor of Arts in Journalism there, and it was a news editorial side. Minors in political science and Spanish, and I was editor-in-chief of the State Press, the campus newspaper, in my senior year.
When you did your undergrad degree, did you have, at that time, any interest in the law, or were you focused on journalism? What were you thinking at that point in your...
I was very focused on journalism, and when I was an undergrad, and even upon graduation from undergrad, I said, I'm done with school. I will never go back to any school ever. I like to write. I'm going to be a reporter. It's going to be my career as a journalist. A couple years in, I was a state and local government reporter mostly, and so that had me looking at a lot of statutes and ordinances, and I was thinking, even as a journalist, I was like, gosh, I could be a lot more informed on these things. It'd be really nice to know how they worked. And I also got a bit tired of observing rather than participating. And so that led me back to thinking about applying to law school.
Okay. So did you cover any proceedings, court proceedings, or interview any type lawyers in particular that had an impact on you? I
did. Through journalism school, required to sit in on several different court proceedings in a reporting class. And so I that was probably my first introduction to the courts, other than covering them as a school, or other than touring them as a school kid. But when I was thinking about going to law school, I started meeting with lawyers in the community, not for purposes of journalism, of reporting on what they did, but just for purposes of my own investigation. You know, I really like to write. Is that something that lawyers do every day? I want to see what they did on a daily basis, and if I would enjoy what they did.
All right. How long did you have the journalism career before applying to law school?
So I was a journalist for a little over 2 years.
Okay. And then did you study for the LSAT? Did you take any practice exams, or how did you start with your application process to law school?
I did. So I spent about 6 months, I think, studying for the LSAT. I think I decided to take a June administration, and I was out working at the time, so kind of find time in and around working. There'd be slow days in the newsroom where nothing's really happening until the city council meeting that night, that sort of thing. And so I did not take an LSAT course, but I bought a few books. I took all the practice exams in those books. I'm someone who struggles with the logic side of things, the spatial intelligence side of things, directional, and so the logic ones I really focused on. I think even used some old computer applications to practice those kind of questions, because I knew that that was the area where I would struggle the most based on my practice exams.
That's really interesting that you studied on your own, so you kind of self-motivated to outside of a set course. I think that's good for people to hear and know, different options for how to do that.
Thanks.
So how did you did you apply to a lot of different law schools, or just a couple, or did you know you wanted to stay in Arizona, or
I think it ended up being about 8, and I did apply to the in-state schools, ASU and U of A, and I really thought I wanted to try a different climate though. And was also, because I was out working, I was open to kind of starting at any time of the year. Once I made a decision to go, I was like, okay, I really want to get started on this. And so I ended up looking really closely at the University of Michigan Law School because they had a summer start program. So I ended up starting in May, tried that different climate for a while, realized Arizona was home, and then I was able to graduate in December and kind of skip that last half of winter.
Oh, great. Yeah. I've heard Michigan is cold. Never lived there before.
Very cold. So. Not as cold as Minnesota, but almost.
Right. So in law school, before you went to law school, let's go a little bit further back. Did you have anybody in your family that was a lawyer or that you got mentorship from?
I did not have lawyers in the family. Both my parents are certified public accountants, so they had worked in firms, but accounting firms. And then I am the first lawyer in my family, but barely, because my little sister, we always say that she had the idea to go to law school first, and I just ended up going first because she's 3 years younger. And she ended up going straight through from undergrad at Arizona State to law school, and she's currently in private practice in Phoenix. And then I had been out working as a journalist. I called her up. I said, I think I really want to go to law school. She's like, wait a year and we'll go together. And I was like, I think I want to go now. So we were about a year apart in our law school graduations.
Oh, that's neat. Okay. So when you were in law school, did you have any idea what you wanted to do afterwards? Did you have a concept of, government versus private versus, prosecution, defense? Did you have any?
I started to figure that out in law school. I knew I wanted to write a lot with a legal career, so I early in law school started to figure out that litigation was probably the kind of writing I wanted to do. And then Michigan, a lot of the student organizations had events where they'd invite alums to come back and talk about what they did on a daily basis. And I attended every single one of those I could, and ended up gravitating toward the people who were litigators in big firms. I would hear about their days, and I was like, that sounds really neat. I'd like to do that.
Okay. So a couple things. I'm kind of recapping as we talk here, but so one of the takeaways that I hear from that is, to talk to a lot of people that are in that profession to get an idea of what they do and find out what fits with what you're interested in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And lawyers or people who are in law school, I think, can all give different perspectives on that. When I was still working as a journalist, but talking to lawyers in town about what they did on a daily basis, I said, gosh, I wish I had had that kind of conversation before I went to law school.
All right. So then, what was your first job right after law school?
It was with the Associated Press in Columbus, Ohio. So I was what they called a newswoman, and I was a temporary newswoman there. I got to spend the summer in Ohio, which was wonderful. So it was May through September before any of the bad weather, and it was a beautiful summer. Just worked for the wire service that summer, all different shifts, which I enjoyed too. So we'd have the kind of 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. news shift. The 5 a.m. shift was not as desirable, but all of them were neat to kind of cover news around the clock that way and work in a wire service bureau.
Okay. So then how did you get into private practice? What happened next?
Okay. After law school, and I think I messed up that question.
I was like, wait, I thought you went to Snell right after.
Yes.
I was thinking, maybe, no, but that's okay. So
we'll have to cut that one out.
We'll cut that point out.
So get back to college.
Yeah, let's go back to what happened. Okay, so what was your first job right after law school?
Okay, after law school, I started work at Snell and Wilmer, a large firm based in Phoenix, and they have offices throughout the Southwest.
Okay. Did you do the summer program with Snell?
I did, yeah. Okay. So I was the summer after my 2L year, I was a summer associate at Snell and Wilmer, and because I had done that summer start program at Michigan, I only actually had 1 semester of law school left. After completing the summer associate program. Planned on graduating in December and taking the February bar, and the firm, I was very excited. They extended me an offer after the summer, and so I asked if I could start early on April 1st, and ended up starting with the firm on April 1st after graduating that past December and taking the February bar exam.
That's great. One takeaway from that sounds like asking for and trying to work with the people who you want to work with for a long period of time, and hopefully the plans work out.
Yes.
And that's really great.
Absolutely. Yeah, I did, for the practice group that I ended up being in my entire time at the firm, I did a few projects for them over the course of the summer. I liked the people in the group, like the clients, like the type of work they did. And it was a smaller group within the larger organization of the law firm. So really used the summer to figure out that I fit there.
And what was your first, or I guess the question is, what motivated you to start thinking about applying for a position on the bench?
For kind of the last several years of my practice as a lawyer, it had been a goal. I've always wanted to, the way I left journalism, wanted to participate a little more and not just observe all the time. And I ended up wanting to participate kind of from this side of the bench. Always enjoyed being in the courtroom, being quick on my feet in trials. And I was like, I'd really like to be on the bench and be quick on the bench, but discerning. So I think I remember my first maternity leave with my son. I started looking at others' applications for the trial court bench and started thinking of it as a long-term goal.
Okay. And what did you see within those applications that you thought, I've got that, I need to work on that? What was it about the applications that you saw that, how did those help you?
It was always helpful to look at examples, and the current application, I think, is about 80 questions. And so what I really took from that long period of observing the processes and looking at the others' applications was, these are the people who are successful in the process have really kept track of what they had been doing over the years. So if they spoke at a convention or a lunch meeting even, they had wrote it down, the date and time and title of the speaking engagement, because that's one of the questions on the application. Speaking engagements you've done, articles you've written. So if folks are writing articles for clients or writing articles for other people's clients, or even articles that go in community newsletters, keeping track of those sort of things over the years, as well as the types of matters that you've worked on and the types of clients that you serve, were all helpful things for me to start thinking of. This is what's on that application. This is what I kind of want to have handy when I'm applying in a few years.
Okay. Did you have anyone that mentored you through the judicial application process?
I did. Folks at the firm, my partners at the law firm, were all excellent in mentoring me. And then I have served on the State Bar Civil Practice and Procedure Committee for several years. And so I had a couple of colleagues there who really helped me decide the timing of my application, things like that, just kind of sounding boards.
So, and then talking about the logistics of applying for a Superior Court position, can you talk about when it's not a set time of year, it's as the positions
vacancies
open.
arise? Yes.
So how does someone who's interested in that position keep a finger on the pulse of what's happening on the bench?
That's a great question. And the nominating commissions for both the trial court and appellate are very transparent. And so it's kind of like watching any other government body. Their minutes are all online. The administrative folks who basically run the commission for them, keep track of all their documents and recordings and things like that, will give you copies of the recordings of past meetings so you can hear the actual questions asked, the feedback that people have gotten, and how the votes have gone. I found it really helpful to look at all of that stuff. I found it helpful to, people's applications are posted for a short time during the process when they're live. So I found it helpful to download some of those, my favorite examples that I saw, and keep them handy. When I know we're going to have a vacancy on our Supreme Court coming up in March, and when those applicants go before the appellate court nominating commission, those interviews are often videotaped and made public that way. So I enjoyed watching those just to see how those type of applicants answered those questions, because it's a different level of court, but often the questions and the issues before the commissions were the same.
That's very resourceful. I feel like that's amazing. It's great to know that information is all out there. So it's really, the onus is on the person who's interested in it to research and look for the information that is available out there. So that's great.
That can be really helpful too. I wanted to say it's kind of a theme throughout the process too, is don't be afraid to ask for help. And that's another good thing to people who are thinking about applying now or thinking about even in a few years. Talk to some of the nominating commissioners about what they like to see in applicants, because that can help inform a career path. It can help inform what goes in an application.
Okay. And the nominating commissioners, those names are also
public,
public,
right?
And they should be available on the state court website?
Yes,
I'm assuming.
they are. Yeah, Maricopa County Trial Courts Nominating Commission, names and contact information are also public, and all of those folks are happy to meet with applicants or potential applicants. When someone's actively in the application process, there are some restrictions based on their rules about who they can talk to and at what time.
Okay. So you mentioned it's an 80 question or possibly more, about 80 question application. What else can you tell people about in terms of the process, or the application process? What happens next?
I wanted to add too, there's a couple writing samples involved, so folks should be thinking about good pieces of their writing that they're proud of that they could submit as a sample for that. And then there's 8 to 10 letters of recommendation from people who know applicants well in various aspects of their lives. So applicants, in addition to working on the 80 question application, and I like to encourage people to do that a little bit at a time, a little bit every day, kind of building up those things, or even getting the form ahead of time when there is a vacancy, but you're like, oh, I'll apply in 2 or 3 vacancies, and just starting work on it over time, so it's not all built up toward the last minute. You avoid those late nights at the end. But thinking of who might write letters for you, who might send commissioners emails of support on your behalf, and then the commissions themselves have public comment periods where people will go and speak on behalf of applicants, so lining up those folks as well.
Okay. So I think, unless there's anything else on the application side of it, I'd like to shift gears to what you do in your role now as a judge, and what your day looks like.
Yes.
We're at the juvenile court now, so what your cases are like, and just hearing a little bit more about what you do.
Yes, absolutely, and I love it, so happy to talk about it. The juvenile court bench has been so exciting. I feel like I get to make a difference every day with the families and cases I work with. I have a dependency calendar, so that's working with families whose children are possibly going to be declared wards of the state, have been declared wards of the state, or if the case hasn't gone well at all, the family hasn't been able to recover the issues that made it necessary to declare their children wards of the state, then it goes to a termination of parent-child relationship situation. But I also have adoptions as part of my calendar, so those can be bright spots. The stuffed animals are often free. I give them to every kiddo who gets adopted in my courtroom, so that's why we have those on hand. As far as a juvenile dependency calendar in Maricopa County, the mornings are very busy, so it's 12 to 20 hearings set every 15 minutes, and those are report and review hearings mostly, where if a child has been declared a ward of the state, then we review that case every 4 to 6 months by law, to check in and see if the conditions have been remedied or which direction the case is going, make sure everything's okay with the kiddo. I tend to have younger kids on my calendar, so I really don't like to push cases out for a 6-month review. 3 to 4 months is kind of the sweet spot. Sometimes I'll go 5 months if it's an older kiddo who's doing very well in their current placement. So a lot of report and review hearings and pretrial conferences in dependency and termination matters on the morning calendar, and set every 15 minutes. So it's kind of a revolving door of lawyers and parties sometimes, but the variety is interesting, and I enjoy being able to touch a lot of cases at once each morning. Adoptions are also set on the morning calendar, so that's exciting to have kids find permanency in the courtroom and come in for those hearings. Afternoons are trials, so that's either dependency adjudication proceedings, where the end result of that is either a child is declared a ward of the state, if the Department of Child Safety has met its burden to show that that's necessary, or the dependency action is dismissed. And then there's also the termination actions, where you're having a trial on a motion seeking to terminate someone's parent-child relationships.
Okay. So those are pretty busy, packed days. A lot of variety, though.
Yes, a lot of variety. Yeah. It keeps it interesting. When I was taking over from Judge Don Ditzworth, he used to have this courtroom and this calendar before me. I said, okay, morning calendars are pretty busy, and afternoons you get to write your rulings. Afternoons are trial, so you find some other time to write your rulings.
Yeah, wow, so how long are you going to be on the juvenile bench?
Typical rotation in juvenile, I think, is 3 to 4 years. Okay. And juvenile, maybe rather than any other rotation, I think an extra year or 2 can be helpful, just for the length of time you get to know some of the families and some of the cases before you.
Okay. And who makes the decision as to who rotates where and then where a new judge starts?
That is the presiding judge for the county, and currently that's Judge Janet Barton.
Okay. And then do most new judges that start, do they all start in a certain type of court, or is it just where the vacancy is, or how does that work?
It depends a little bit on where the vacancy has arisen, but when they can't start the application process for a vacancy until it actually occurs. So I think technically I filled the vacancy made when Judge Robert Oberbillig retired. Even though I took over the calendar, that was then vacated by Judge Ditzworth, who retired a bit later. So it's kind of thinking about where the need is, where the actual vacancy occurred or the impending vacancy occurred, and then the presiding judge balances all of that, including where the new judge lives based on the commuting distance and where the needs of the court are.
Okay. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about, because we've got a wide variety of people who are part of the Los Abogados organization. So for those students who are either in high school or in undergrad and thinking about a career in the law, both what advice would you give them, and what type of skills do you think they need to think about developing to be successful?
I think communication skills at any level are important. I always wish I would have done speech and debate in high school, but I didn't. I was busy with marching band and swim team.
Marching band, yes.
Yeah.
I think
Alto saxophone,
yes, yes.
Kindred spirit.
Yes. Right.
So I missed out on speech and debate, but I encourage people toward that direction because it really helps with the oral communication skills and verbal, the writing for that type of competition. I did a program called We the People, the Citizen and the Constitution, where it had us looking at a lot of Supreme Court cases on constitutional rights and then testifying in mock congressional hearings at the competition. So those kind of opportunities to improve all types of communication skills, I think, are really important for people thinking they might want to go on to law school and a legal career.
Okay. So for people who are in law school and maybe thinking about both, how to get to, if they're interested in ultimately becoming a judge, or if they're just thinking about what to do with their career, what general advice would you give them?
Yep. I would advise them to talk to people about what they do every day. If they think there's someone, hey, I would really like that job. Either talk to them about what they do, take them to lunch or coffee, and just talk to them about what their day looks like, what they like about it, what they dislike, and then kind of take that information and match it up with that individual person's likes and dislikes. Specifically, if you're looking at a judicial career eventually, I would recommend clerkships. I would recommend judicial internships. I did a couple judicial internships my first summer in law school for a Michigan Supreme Court justice and then a federal district court judge back here in Phoenix. And I found those really helpful, getting an inside look at what goes on in chambers and in the courtroom. And then I would, it's going to sound funny because I said I didn't like observing and that's why I left journalism, but I would recommend, in addition to what you're doing on a daily basis, whether it's classes or whether you're already out working in a career, to observing the processes that are going on that will eventually get you where you want to be.
So can we talk a little bit about one of the popular things to talk about, which is the work-life balance? And
Yes.
I know in the law that's a complicated thing to have, but if you could speak about it a little bit in your experience.
Yes, absolutely. And in my experience, everyone kind of has to find their own balance. So it's a hard thing to give or take advice from, but it also helps, I think, to observe how people are balancing on their own and talk to them about it and use some parts of that work for you to inform your own balance. So I have 2 kids who are 7 and 5, and had them both before I made partner at the law firm where I had my entire private practice career, and was my husband had worked in journalism as well. We met in journalism school at Arizona State, and was very lucky that he was able to stay home with them mostly after my maternity leaves were over and until they had started school. So he would teach some classes at Arizona State, some journalism classes. They had the professor schedule a bit, and so then I would balance things where I would come home from work, make sure I was home to take care of them while he was at the classes. But that was how the personal balance worked out for us, where I became the primary breadwinner given my job, and he was mostly home with the children. So that cut down on childcare costs for us. It was helpful to me because I didn't have to rush people out of the house in the morning. Now that they're in school and he's getting back to work, there's that mad rush in the mornings to get everyone going. But that was how the balance worked out the first several years for us. And I know it's different for everybody. And I think employers too are hopefully getting better at realizing that it can feel like a long time in the moment, and for parents too, but it's actually quite fleeting. It's like, if we just get through this kind of rough spot. I used to tell my husband when they're both babies, I was like, okay, this year is going to be the busiest because they're in 2 different daycares or 2 different schools and a lot of driving in the young ages, but folks get through it, and it's all about kind of finding your own balance and take what you see in others to make it work for you.
It's really, there are a lot of similarities there. I know for us too, there was a period where we're like, when is this going to end? But you knew that it was going to,
Yes.
those rough nights of no sleep, and
Right.
it's probably similar to some of the struggles in, even undergrad, when you feel like the exams are, when are the exams going to stop?
Yep.
When am I going to stop being tested? It comes in different ways later on in life. But
Yes. Sometimes those all-nighters in college can prepare you for a newborn later on.
Or election law,
Yes.
which is what I know.
Exactly.
The practice. So I guess any other general advice for students or professionals on applying or thinking about the bench?
Think about what makes you you as well, because there are questions on the application that focus on diversity and how we build a more diverse bench in the state of Arizona. I know that's something the trial court nominating commissions are very interested in, and the governor's office as well, kind of looking at all aspects of diversity. So thinking about those aspects and engaging in different things in the community that can speak to that part of your application.
Okay. That's some really great advice. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I know your schedule is packed, especially after hearing about it, but it means so much to have this video available for people to watch and listen to. So thank you again.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and would encourage people thinking about applying to keep after it and to persist.
Okay. Thank you.